In 1974, a single photograph shattered a century of fashion tradition. But what happened to the woman who made it possible? 1974 was the year fashion was forced to look in the mirror and, for the first time, feel ashamed. That year, a black woman appeared on the cover of Vogue, Beverly Johnson. It wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a rupture. A shockwave. For the first time, the beauty ideals up until then defined almost exclusively by white skin, fine hair, and narrow features were publicly, undeniably challenged. That photograph wasn't just a cover, it was a revolution. But behind the frame, behind the smile, a different story was unfolding. One that the industry never wanted to tell. Beverly Johnson was born in Buffalo, New York, in 1952. Brilliant, disciplined, and unapologetically different from a young age. She first gained attention as a competitive swimmer, then began studying criminal justice. But fate had other plans. Modeling in the 1970s was a world built by and for white women. Black models were rarely booked, and when they were, it was often under labels like ethnic or exotic, as if they didn't quite belong. But Beverly did more than belong. She dominated. She showed up with poise, professionalism, and the kind of presence that couldn't be ignored. She started to appear in magazines like Glamour and Elle, but Vogue? That was the final frontier. A black woman had never graced its cover. Until August 1974, there she was. Beverly Johnson, staring directly into the reader's eyes. Her smile didn't ask for permission. It declared her place. It was more than a photo. It was recognition. For thousands of young black girls, it was the first time they saw a reflection of themselves in a fashion magazine. It was a new visual language, one that said beauty no longer belonged to just one race. But while the front page celebrated the breakthrough, the backstage told another story. Because Beverly's real battle had just begun. She was now a name, a face, an icon. And that made her dangerous. Not to everyone, but to those who'd built their careers on exclusion. Her presence called the entire system into question. After her cover, yes, more black models began to appear. But the resistance was palpable. The system didn't change overnight. In many ways, it didn't want to change at all. The same smile that inspired millions made others uncomfortable. As her career skyrocketed, Beverly's silence became more dangerous than her words. She began speaking out, not just walking the runway, but walking into conversations the industry tried to avoid. She was no longer just a model. She was a voice, a challenge, a demand for equity. She wasn't there to play the game. She was there to change the rules. If you believe fashion should include every shade, every story, subscribe now for more untold history from behind the catwalk. After Beverly Johnson's groundbreaking Vogue cover, her rise seemed unstoppable. Ad campaigns, runway shows, talk show appearances, they all followed, one after another. But with visibility came resistance. The industry that had reluctantly let her in now began trying to control how far she could go. A black model shining in the mainstream wasn't something the system was built for. And it showed. By the late 1970s, Beverly was more than just a model. She was a cultural force. The definition of beauty hadn't just expanded, it had been rewritten. A woman with afro hair, dark skin, and commanding presence was no longer just on billboards. She was in the dreams of young girls across the country. But that kind of visibility comes with a price. She was expected to be the example. Always, if you're here for the stories fashion tried to bury, make sure to subscribe now for more untold truths from behind the catwalk. No longer confined to photo shoots, Beverly began appearing at conferences, college lectures, and in opinion pieces. The Vogue cover had cracked the glass, but she picked up the shards and turned them into a message. In interview after interview, she began calling out pay gaps, casting discrimination, and the unspoken barriers that still separated black models from lasting success. As her voice grew louder, the industry began to split. Some rallied around her. Others called her too political, too vocal. But Beverly didn't stop. She couldn't, because she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was channeling every model who had been sidelined, silenced, erased. This chapter marks her transformation, not just as a model, but as a political figure. She was ready to pay the price of being more than beautiful. By now, Beverly Johnson wasn't just a symbol, she was in direct conflict with the system. Her beauty was her weapon, but it was also her shield. Behind the glittering front the fashion world offered her, invisible boundaries remained firmly in place. Magazine covers, ad campaigns, television features, they were all there. But the moment Beverly stepped forward with her voice, her politics, and her full identity, the industry began slowly pushing her back. Her media representation was always part of a negotiation. Black, but not too black. Strong, but not intimidating. These coded compliments revealed just how deep the bias ran. Soon, Beverly's name started quietly disappearing from campaigns. The excuse? Too political for the brand. But Beverly didn't fade. While the industry tried to isolate her, she made herself louder. Conferences, memoirs, op-eds. She wasn't just a model anymore. She was a movement, a role model, a voice for girls who looked like her, and for those who'd been told to stay in the background. Her story wasn't just about fame. It was about the personal toll of systemic exclusion. If you believe voices like Beverly's deserve to be heard, not hidden, subscribe now for more stories that broke the silence. As her influence grew, so did public curiosity about her personal life. The media began focusing less on her success and more on her struggles, her family, her relationships, her trauma. Her story became gossip. But Beverly once again turned the moment into a platform. Every microphone became a megaphone for the silenced. This chapter tells the story of a woman who refused to lose her voice, even when the cost was high. Because Beverly Johnson didn't just want to be seen, she needed to be heard. Beverly Johnson's Vogue cover wasn't just a personal victory. It was the spark that cracked open the fashion world, echoing all the way into today. Every black model who followed Naomi Campbell, Tara Banks, Alec Weck walked through a door Beverly silently opened. But just because the door was open didn't mean the room was safe. The industry had no choice but to make Beverly visible. But the deeper systemic issues still untouched. The next generation of black models was displayed in the windows, but they weren't given power. No creative voice. No seat at the table. Visibility had increased, but inclusion had limits. Beverly saw this clearly. Over time, many who benefited from her breakthrough stopped mentioning her name. The system, after all, preferred symbols it could control. It wanted faces without voices. But Beverly had never been just a face. She was an idea, a disruption, a question that refused to go unanswered. If you believe beauty alone isn't enough, and that voice matters, subscribe now for more stories they don't want you to hear. As the years passed, Beverly's stance only sharpened. She kept fighting not for herself, but for the young models behind her. She wrote books, spoke in documentaries, appeared in interviews where she refused to let the industry rewrite its history. To her, this wasn't just a career, it was responsibility. Most importantly, Beverly Johnson didn't fade into history. Today's rising models still draw strength from her story. In every camera angle, in every confident walk down the runway, you can see her imprint. Beverly isn't a photograph. She's a living, breathing force of change. This chapter tells the story of Beverly Johnson's invisible revolution, the one she planted in others, and the one the fashion world still owes her one thing for: respect. Today, Beverly Johnson is still here. She speaks, she writes, she teaches. To reduce her to an old photograph would be to cut her story short, because Beverly isn't a moment. She's a movement. Fashion may have changed, but the system still hasn't fully looked itself in the mirror. And Beverly? She's still holding up the reflection. Her story isn't about one breakthrough. The Vogue cover was only the beginning. The real story was the quiet battle that followed. Beverly kept walking, not just on runways, but inside the dreams of young women. The barriers they face today, she shattered them years ago. But this story still isn't finished, because the system still tells too many young women, "You're too different, too loud, too black." Beverly's voice continues to echo through those walls. Her stance isn't just inspiring, it's a compass for the next generation. If you believe the story isn't over yet, if you want to help write the next chapter, subscribe now. Because change only happens when we all speak up. Beverly Johnson still gives talks at universities. She appears in documentaries. She writes. Her voice is just as powerful, but now she's not alone. She's backed by a generation that grew up in her shadow, walked in her light. She's no longer just a model. She's a perspective, a memory, a reminder. This isn't a goodbye. It's the beginning of new questions. Beverly Johnson's story ends with a call to action. Being seen is beautiful, but being heard, that's the revolution.